questions like the inspirations of this performance. I heard that it was originally staged in 2011.
11,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah.
So 8 years ago, it's actually my first time revisiting a work and remounting it. So yeah, it was a very interesting process to look at it again and to build it for a new space. But in 2011, which is when the show was originally created, the inspiration for the show came from events that were happening in Bangkok in 2010. There were a lot of protests that were happening between two political parties, and one side had a sit-in at a very busy commercial intersection in Bangkok called the Ratchapoom intersection, which if you have had some time to visit Bangkok, it's right where Central World is. So it's like a huge commercial center, and there was a sit-in by the protesters, which made it very difficult for people to go shopping, and it made it very difficult for people to get to work. And as you know, in Bangkok already with the traffic, so people get pretty angry when it comes to not being able to work, to shop, and to get through their commute. So what happened was that besides the political, because of the political tension that was mounting at that time, and also because people were frustrated, I noticed that on Facebook there were some comments talking about the protesters, saying that they were a nuisance and that they wished that it would stop. But in particular, the thing that really stood out to me, and I really can't remember who wrote this, but I just remember being really shocked that someone said, "I wish they would just die. They deserve to die." And I just thought, wow, that's just deeply shocking to me that somebody could say that, could say like, I hope that this group of people will die. And we're not in a war. This is just like political parties, people demonstrating. And so I think because of that, I started thinking a lot about violence with that. And then also, when those protesters got dispersed, there was burning and looting that happened. So the dispersion of the protesters was violent itself, and then the protesters, when they were being chased out of that area, also retaliated by attacking actually like the shops and other things that were around there. And it made me think a lot just about like what happens when we get to that moment where we just feel like I'm ready to just break things, and I don't care anymore, and actually the damage feels good. So sort of that was the political situation at the time, 8 years ago, or actually 9 years ago really, that made me want to make this work. And I would say the last piece of it was something that I had always wondered about, which is that I think in movies in particular, there's like a genre of movies, which is like where the comedy comes from the people getting hurt. So at the time, like the movie Meet the Parents, I don't know if you've ever seen that, or where it's like the main character just keeps getting like all kinds of terrible things happen to him, but it's supposed to be funny. And I've been the kind of audience member that watches something like that and thinks like, this is not funny. I think this person is hurt. And so I felt like I had some questions about that, about like, how interesting that like we find the pain that other people feel or the humiliation that they feel funny. So I think these three things, like the sort of human nature question, the political situation at the time, and wondering like what would prompt someone to be able to say about another group of people, I hope they die. And then the third thing, which is like what happens to us, to a person, when they're ready to just like damage things. That was the origin of Damage Joy.
So you mentioned about like, because you mentioned film as a medium, and I found it interesting like compared with film, because like I wonder like, because like in film we had this kind of genre that it's okay to see people getting hurt and we enjoy seeing it, but somehow like because in film That's a theory saying that film is somehow like double removed from reality. Like theater is one time removed from reality. So the character is fictional, but the actor on the stage actually are real.
Yeah.
Like Julius are fictional, but the actors that portraying Julius are real. So actually like the audience like share the same time and space with the actors on the stage. But with film, the characters are fictional, so characters are not real. But also like the people on the screen are not real people, but it's image of them. So somehow like when people getting hurt in film, it's quite, how to say like, acceptable because you kind of see that they don't get like really hurt. They have safety or something like that. But on theater, that safety is like quite like, how do you say like,
is removed. You're in this. You're breathing the same air.
Yeah, safety is kind of luxury. Like it's not provided on theater. That on the same level with in the film. So I wonder like because like in film there's kind of this genre that people feel comfortable seeing other people get hurt. But I think even theater if there's a tradition of that kind of comedy in theater about people getting hurt.
Yeah, I mean, I think that actually clown shows, and like the world of Damaged Joy is set in like a circus, a weird circus world. But I think clown shows, slapstick, in the American theater vaudeville, also there's a whole genre of theater, or even puppet theater, where violence is funny.
And then like when you, and also I'm interested in when you talk about the politics issue because in the performance we saw like last night, it seems to be like how do you say like linked out of the political context.
Yes.
It's become more like a universal that could be applied to anywhere. Do you think that how do you say like it might lose some like specificity from doing that, or why you choose clown and choose to remove some political inspirations from the actual play itself?
I think it's so interesting because when we made the show the first time, it was quite recently. It was only 1 year later after those events had happened, and I think those events were still in the minds and the recent memory of the audiences of the Thai audiences that came to see the show. And when I was invited to restage Damaged Joy for BIPAM, I wasn't really sure whether I should change things around with it, or I wanted to look at it again and to see what was still relevant about it. And I think because when I watched it again, I thought, oh, actually, the thing that I want to hold on to more now is of the 3 questions that I had, which is about like the human nature aspect, reflecting the political situation, and then looking at like what does it mean to get like so angry and want to destroy things. I found myself most interested in the human nature aspect, and I think that's something that because I think because I am Thai and American, and I didn't grow up in the US or in Thailand. I actually grew up moving around, living in different countries, because my father worked for the UN, and so every 3 or 4 years we had to move. So in fact, I grew up almost always an outsider to the culture that I was in. And I would say even up until today, in my home cultures of America and Thailand, there's always a piece of me that feels like an outsider. And for that reason, I'm interested in what is universal. I find myself wanting to know, like what, even though there are things that set us apart, that make us very different from each other, values that can be so different, what joins us together? And I think that actually this specific feeling of enjoying someone else's hurt and pain is universal, I think. And I found myself very interested in this question and trying to explore that more in this restaging.
And what do you find recently from this restaging?
I think that one of the things that felt important to me in revisiting it that I think I didn't do very well the first time was about this piece is both about what happens to the characters on stage, but also what happens to the audience in the theater. And in the original production, it was in a very small space, only 30 people. And let's say like the action was happening here and the audience is here. So they're on a flat panel and you can't really see anybody else. You can see like the people in front of you, maybe feel it a little bit next to you. And I found that, it's not fair to the audience actually, because I told them from the beginning that if they all wave their flags, it will stop. And if you are there and you're waving your flag, and next to you other people are also waving it, and you're wondering like, why isn't it stopping? Feels like we're all waving our flag, but you can't see that actually behind you over in the corner somebody isn't. So I wanted in this restaging to change it so that the audience could see each other more. And I think that makes for a different journey as well, because I read in some of the audience reactions or feedback that we received from last night that the thing that some audience members felt was the most violent was not what was happening on stage, but was the reaction of the other audience members who were not waving their flags. And they're like, what is wrong with you? Wave your flag. But I think that that's actually an important piece, something that I also wanted to bring out some more in this version, which is that we are together and we are responsible for each other, and it's hard, but we have to, if anything is going to change on the stage or in our society, in politics, it's us. We have to work together somehow. Yeah.
I wonder, maybe this might be the big questions that people like the audience would ask, like if there ever like any times that the play actually stopped. Is that ever any time that 100%?
It happened once, and we have a contingent, like there is a rehearsal plan or a staging plan in place in case it does happen. It happened once in 2011 with a group of kids from high school who they all knew each other and they came together to watch the show, and they started waving their flags, and then they basically just like told each other, they told everyone to do it. So I remember feeling at the time that I was disappointed because I was like, this is not an authentic 100%. There is a social pressure to do it. But I realized afterwards that I was like, actually, no, that is authentic. Like the fact that we feel the social pressure to do something, even if we're not totally ready to do it, is also another real reaction, and something that I wanted to bring into this restaging as well. But yes, so that was the one and only time that there was 100% flag waving.
So it's not like pre-designed not to reach 100%, right? So it actually could reach that.
It can happen, yes. Yeah.
Interesting. I thought like maybe just the staff behind was just like only go far to like 95 and would let to the touch.
No, we were. I mean, last night because there was a big reaction at several moments, and we were all there like, is this it? Did it happen? But I can tell you that there was one person, and maybe you saw other people as well, that was very close to actually where we were, that the entire show sat like this. And so they're like, well, there we go. It's not 100%.
I think it's very interesting that you have a new design for these audience listing for these new versions, but I wonder, because there's something I was thinking during watching it, that it might turn into like becomes like a mob mentality in a way, that you have to wave to be a decent person in front of everyone else, because it's different from like anonymous voting, that you go into the election booth and you cast your vote and nobody knows like who you vote for. So what do you think about this? Like you have to be somehow like being pressured to do something?
I think that I'm interested in audiences having to handle that pressure and to decide how they're going to react with it. There's some empty spaces at the front. So sorry for the people who came, but there are some seats here. Because I think that is also part of what happens in society. There's a theater practitioner who's a Brazilian theater practitioner you might know, Augusto Boal, who has since passed away, but he did Forum Theater. and other kinds of theater, but probably most famous for creating a form of theater called forum theater. And one of the things that I love about his work is that he said theater is a rehearsal for revolution. This is like where we practice what we're going to do. And so I think maybe that's also part of it, is that I think I wanted to try and replicate the same kind of social pressure that the audience might feel in real life in the theater as well.
But this is dangerous somehow, in a way. Pressure. Okay.
Or maybe
Yeah, we can move to the audience now.
if you want.
Sure.
While we're on the topic of social pressure, last night I was like, you mentioned a little, but everybody's waving, and if you're not waving, there's a pressure. What if everybody's not waving? And I like, come on, stop me before it's too late.
Yeah.
It's another kind of pressure
It's
as well.
And
But
another
like,
kind of pain.
yeah, and at that point I asked myself, would I be considered weak to not be able to handle the pressure of that simple move? Yeah, that's what happened to me last night.
But I think it's not simple, and I think it's super hard, actually. And I have experienced that here in Bangkok as well, where it's like, if you are the one person who thinks differently about something, and you know that all around you, everybody else is thinking one thing, to have the strength to be able to say like, actually, no, is really hard.
Okay, one thing I'd like to ask, like, if you choose this form of non-narrative performance, like comparing to like narrative performance, but maybe it's your background or something, or because like in Thailand, I remember watching another performance that has audience participating in terms of voting from Pita, but that's like kind of like narrative, like investigative story. So somehow each choice is quite implicated in the story. But this one is more like it's one spectacle after spectacle. So, but it's have a how to say like relationship with the audience is quite different because that each part is somehow like not that related to each other.
Yes.
And if you stop this part, like the play still go on
Right.
in a way. So my question is just that why non-narrative as a for this one?
I think non-narrative in this sense means no text, right?
No text or no like not like that clear like one
A
incident
goes
A
to
to
B.
B and go to C. It's like doing something tea time, doing
Yes.
something else tea time, some game show tea time, something like that.
Like absurd.
Yeah, absurd. Yeah.
I think in this case, one of the things that I like about non-linear work, so things that where it's not a logical progression from A to B to C, as well as not having text, is that I think it leaves room for, I think maybe for two things. It leaves room for the audience to fill in the details on their own, to do some of their own guesswork about what is happening. And my hope is that that is therefore more engaging for the audience, because something is not being easily given to them, so they have to watch it and think, what is this? And so I think that's also another rehearsal for revolution in a way, is like, look at something and interpret it and think about what it is that you're seeing and allow yourself to create meaning for it, rather than looking at something and saying like, oh, I know what that is, it's this, or this is telling me what it is, and so I don't have to do any work on my side, I can just receive the information. But I think in particular, in a non-linear format, I think I enjoy it. I would call it more like a juxtaposing thing. So it's like putting red next to green, and then like I'm just speaking metaphorically in terms of the scenes. I think I like it artistically because there's more room for surprise. And so yeah, I enjoy being able to just sort of start here and then go here and then come back
then like in this performance it's like how somehow like enjoyment associated with violence. Could we imagine enjoyment without violence?
Like enjoying things.
Without having to hurt anybody or oppressing someone. Like I'm not sure, like because sometimes like funny stories, the rules of it is very racist or sexist or somehow like has to oppress some certain people. Yeah. Is there like a enjoyment without like violence? Could we imagine that? Because in film actually there's a lot of like theory circling around this idea like visual pressure is like deceiving, it's oppressing women, it's oppressing like black people or something like that. There's always like that. So it's quite difficult like to think further like how it would be like.
Really interesting question.
Yeah. But I could come up with that answer as well.
Yeah. I wonder if, I mean, I guess it depends on enjoyment. One of the things I'm wondering is, can something be funny without being painful? Because like, I just think about, even with the body reaction, so like if I tickle you, that's pretty funny, but it's also a little bit like, oh no, there's like a tiny bit of feeling uncomfortable.
It's quite agitated, like you need to risk like hurting maybe a little bit, but still like it's a physical violence or emotional ones or psychological ones to it. Even like a very like a legit like like films like for the family, there's still some violence in it.
Yeah. Definitely.
So
Just now that you asked this question, it makes me think that actually it's a separate identity kind of thing, because actually the person who thinks something is funny, the feeling of funny is not in the subject, and the subject might not feel a thing. For example, you see an ugly person and you think, oh, he or she looks funny. That funny feeling is with you, who is the beholder, pretty much. But the pain, the pain, you think it might fall onto the other person that you look at, but it's like it's a perspective of one person. So like feeling funny and having the pain, it might not actually go together because it belongs to two separate entities happening simultaneously. So actually,
it's a matter of perspective to the same
like
event.
you think something's funny, that person that you think is funny doesn't think that, and maybe therefore he or she doesn't feel painful in the process. But you might think, oh, I feel that's funny. Oh, I'm doing something that's probably painful to that person, but that's like, this is in your realm and not really a reality for the other person or the counterpart. So, but that's a very interesting, intriguing question.
Maybe the clown thing, like the clown itself as a concept is like, like the character just like vulnerable, like violence, entertainment. Like, it has to be heard for the audience to feel good.
Hurt or humiliated.
Humiliated, And I think it's quite, I'm not sure, like, because that's one thing that somehow bugs me while watching it as well. Because as you deploy clown character, you force the audience into like a very responsible position. Like it's like these characters are created or pre-designed to be laughed at, but somehow during the show, the audience also are made to feel like a little bit guilty to laugh at or not. I'm not sure. It's also,
I think it's part of the challenge that the play is asking of the audience. Some audience members might not feel guilty. They might just think like, this is great. I think this is really funny and really entertaining, or boring, I don't know, but like don't actually feel any empathy or sympathy for the characters. But I also try to create opportunities on stage for the audience to feel that for them.
Because sometimes, at some moment during the performance, I feel there's a violence toward me as well. Sometimes, maybe that's the pressure.
That the characters are violent towards you, or that the play is violent towards you?
I think the whole play somehow like becomes violent towards me. Like position that like, do I need to wave a flag or should I not to continue this, to for the story to flow or something like that? Should I wave it? But like the actors must practice it to some like precise. So that's what I felt. Even you need violence to in the play, not on the stage, but in the atmosphere, like towards the audience to reach this conclusion. Then oh.
You have a question?
Any question?
No, I would just comment something. Or what I just realized is, well, first, thank you for the show. I really enjoyed it yesterday, and I'm a clown myself, so I love to see how your clowns play and perform. And so I was just thinking about this thing: where are you safe on stage, and where's the force with the clown and the pain with the clown? That's, I think, the story about the clown character and the failing. We're laughing about the failing, but I think what yesterday happened was that we were seeing the actor. We were feeling like, okay, this is how to say, edging or coming to the edge between the actor and the clown character, and the character. No, the actor is not safe, anymore. Yeah. I think that's maybe the difference of what I saw as a new thing, that you played with that. So the safety for the actor. You understand what?
Yes,
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, you probably know because you try to do that.
Like how much you like how the actors prepare for their own safety?
A lot.
A lot.
A lot. There were many things. Actually, the show is designed for the audience to feel more pain than the actors in terms of what's happening to them. So I think probably the most. Has anyone not seen the show, so I don't spoil anything? Okay. Great. Thank you. I'm glad I asked first. So there's some equipment that you see on stage, which has been specifically chosen, and we tried lots of different varieties to see what would look the most painful to the outside eye, but actually to the actor themselves. It's not that it's not painful, it is a little bit painful, but it's not as much as in the imagination of the audience. And then we also had to put, I care a lot about the safety of the actors, and not just about their physical safety, but also their psychological safety. In America right now, there's a whole way of behaving if you're doing fight choreography on stage. There's like a system of how to rehearse it and how to make sure that you always know that I'm going to hit you from this angle like this, it's going to go like this. So you know what to expect, and the actors can feel safe in what's happening. Right now there's a movement I think in the US and the UK also to do the same thing with intimate violence. So any scenes that are like rape scenes, or scenes that are like sexual violence between people on stage. And I also felt that in the show, I needed to bring in those things with the actors so that they could experience that. And I learned that through trial and error, actually. I learned it from the actors not being okay in the first place. So I also want to let you know this, I'm not like a perfect person. I found out from the very first show in 2011, I did not have these safety measures in place for the actors. I think everybody knew that, I know that you care about me, and that you don't really want to hurt me, but still somehow towards the end of the run in 2011, the actors' faces were like, not okay. And I was checking with them like, what's going on, what's happening? And they're like, I don't know, I don't feel good, I'm not sure what's wrong. And I realized that, it's because this show and I myself am asking you to go to a very dark and violent place and to release all these things inside of yourself. Your body had a ritual actually for beginning rehearsal and for ending rehearsal that allowed them to just have a frame to, I think, most important, like psychologically and to physically step into the show and to step out of it and to know that I am actually safe as a human being, both in my psychology and in my body, was very important.
It's reminds. It's just some like anecdotes, like in films, like there's one director that she's like to put like a destroy cars on her film because like destroy car is authentic. If you put like mutilated bodies on that, like her body is all fake, like fake blood, fake organ, but destroy car is really destroyed. The car is really destroyed for the film. It's a weird thing. Okay,
Well, actually, I can respond to that in the
Yeah.
sense of how do you, I think it's a question also in theater, how do you make an audience viscerally, like inside their body, feel something that the actor is feeling? And so again, not to spoil anything, but there were so part of designing the show or figuring out what the scene should be was about trying to find that. And the very first time that we were making the show in 2011, we experimented with lots of different kinds of scenes. Poupée is laughing because she was in the original production, so she remembers. And it's just kind of, it's interesting to see what feels real, what feels the most real.
Okay, I see.
And there are certain things that feel, I think, that audiences watching that will just be like, oh my god, like you feel it inside your body.
So how you comes up with like this? I don't know how to call it. It's not a storyline, but
The
it's kind of
structure.
storyline. The structures of it, like how you like play with it. How you like, okay, I start with this one, and then next to the next level. How you comes up with this like design?
I think at the beginning in 2011, it was through a process of trial and error. And we started, I think I just started with the question of how can I put violence on stage in a way that is funny and that has different levels of violence. I think it just started with that. And I watched a lot of like Charlie Chaplin movies and things like that to sort of get ideas. Talked with my designer at the time, who is not the designer of the current show, but he and I collaborated a lot. He was the production designer for the whole thing, and we spoke a lot before even starting rehearsals about what should the environment be, because I didn't know when I first started thinking about this show that it should be a clown world. That was something that we finally came up with together. And so I think it started with trial and error of different kinds of scenes, and then in collaboration with the actors, really looking at it and saying like, that works. Sometimes we don't know why it works, we're like, that one, yeah, that's good, okay, this is good. And then once you have a sort of like a buffet of what are the things that feel good or look good, then it's my job, I think, to then be like, how about this order? If it goes like this, then we'll go like this. And again, then that goes through one more trial and error process of being like, oh, actually, no, that scene should go here, or it should come out, it doesn't work there. But the funny thing is that in revisiting the show in 2011, I really thought when Poupée first invited me to do it, I was like, oh my god, it's 8 years later, I've grown so much. I know so much more now, surely I will want to change the show. And I looked at it again, I was like, oh, actually, it's okay. Like the structure kind of, I can see why, or I can see what's happening. And in this piece, but in revisiting it, I think that I found more clarity about why I instinctively chose to do something. So I think like in 2011, I was let my instinct lead me. It was like this. And now 8 years later, I can look at it and be like, oh, actually, this is one piece that is dealing with this kind of thing. And then another piece over here, it shifts. So, yeah.
Have you like staged it outside Thailand?
No.
Have you ever wished for? Or?
Yes. Yeah.
And like, because you got the concept before like eventually choosing clown as your characters, like it's like I wonder like before clown, like how you get to that clown, or you just answer like because it's a.
It actually, this came from part of myself being interested in experimenting with different ways of creating work at the time. And I was really interested in the idea of what happens if I have an idea and I work with a designer first before anybody else. And the designer and I make a show, and then the actors and have to figure out what the story of that world is. So I think in my original thought, I was like, okay, I'm gonna make a world with someone who's a set designer and a costume designer, and we will decide first that like this show takes place in this kind of space. There's these kinds of like possibilities. Childish stage or like a young stage. So all the kind of like movement and the jokes, the hurt, the funniness, all of that I think are things that you might recognize from your childhood, or behavior that maybe you did when you were a kid. And then in the second level is for me what I would call like the adolescent level, where there's still a certain level of innocence about what you're doing, about what you're choosing to do to another person. In the sense that you might not fully understand how violent what you're doing is to someone else. That I think is in the second level. And then in the third level is the adult stage for me, which is that you have full consciousness about what you're doing. Yeah, so that was the progression that I found.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
You mentioned the fact that you haven't done the show outside Thailand. Ironically, there's a show that I'm representing that's a clowning show from New Zealand by a Brazilian guy who teaches clowning in New Zealand. And I haven't seen your show, so I'd like to obviously make my way to your show. But that aside, I mean, that's something that maybe I can talk to you about later. But that aside, when you said, you talked about protecting the people within the performance, I find that really, I think it's really pivotal. And when I work in New Zealand, even though I'm originally from Malaysia, having lived there for 17 years, I have found it very comfortable, and I find it really good to work in the Māori way of delivering projects. So I deliver all my projects under what we call tikanga Māori, which is Māori custom. And part of that custom is to make sure that you have a start and an end to every process.
Yeah.
So when you mentioned that, I thought that's what we try to do. We try to make sure that we get everybody together at the beginning of the process. We basically just get in a circle and we introduce each other, but we also talk about how we're feeling. So it's kind of a check-in, and also what's our intention for that day, whether it's a performance or a rehearsal process. And then when everybody is left, when the audience is left and everything's happened, we bring everybody together again. So it's not just the actors, everybody involved. So it's the cast, the crew, and we do the same thing again. And we check in and see whether, everything went okay, if there is any issues, if there's anything we need to be aware of. So we do that every single day during the process. And even when we do workshops that last just a week and nobody knows each other at the beginning, at the end of it, we call whānau, which is family, and we all become very, very close because of the intimacy of sharing things in that cone of silence. So yeah, I thought I'd just share that with you.
I mean, I think that rituals are important for that reason, that they give us a framework, they give us a sense of safety, whether you have it, whether it's linked to any religious practice or to an artistic practice, or sometimes even a self-care practice that you might have for yourself, that having rituals, I think, are really helpful.
And I'm so happy to hear that you're doing that, because I think a lot of non-Māori practicing, theatre companies, what they find is there's a lot of warm-up, but there's never the cool-down.
Yeah.
And that's what's affecting our mental health in the industry, because I work a lot in that area as well, because there's a lot of suicide within our area of working because of the pressures, and that's another conversation. But yeah, so it's really nice to hear that you're caring for the people you work with.
Even though I treat them badly on stage.
I haven't seen that yet. So.
You'll see.
May I comment? I watched yesterday, and I'm from Jakarta, and I really can relate the violence because now in Jakarta, while the MRT is now building, and how's the people's traffic jam? It's very famous in Jakarta itself as the number one. They said that how the violence itself. I mean, when I saw it, I can really relate, and I feel that maybe that was what happens in the minds of Jakarta itself, because we as the people, I think we tend to not to say how we feel, while you show the violence, it show how it must done. I mean, it's like relieving in this case. If you maybe played in Jakarta, it's like maybe to hold your anger management. It's like to apprehend the anger itself. So even when I watch it, I'm waiting for it to get worse. In that case, and also I felt like the majority of people suppressing me to, I have to wave also, if not, I'm not following the people in that case. So it really relates, and it's a great show also. Thank you for showing it, and it's really relating to us, contextual to us now, and then because in Jakarta itself now it's also on a democratic session. I mean, there's lots of demos talking about the president, and people at work is also, it's confusing, all the commodity. So it's really, and I hope it will be played again, maybe, in a more contextual and more aggressive. So more aggressive. Sorry, thank you. Just
Thank you.
Well, speaking of context, I think it's interesting because actually in Thai media, especially in Thai TV series drama, there's a lot of violence in it. But in reality, I think from my perspective, most of the Thai, especially middle class, are quite passive aggressive. They're not overly violent, but they're very passive aggressive. So they kind of enjoy watching Thai drama because it's so open violence, so releasing. You should feel bad about watching people slapping each other on TV, or should I? So I wonder if violence is somehow permissible or okay in a way.
I think it's interesting. I was talking to Thee, who's there in this interview earlier about what is the significance of doing this play for a Thai audience in particular, and I felt like that's it. That's the thing that I'm really interested in having Thai audience members think about, which is that I feel like one of the things I'm really interested in as a director, just in general, is wherever I am thinking about what are the assumptions that are inside of a culture. And when something's an assumption, you don't know that it's an assumption because you think that it just is what it is.
For granted, yeah.
You take it for
Natural.
granted. And I think that one of the assumptions in Thai culture is that we are peaceful people. We are peaceful. We are peace-loving people. And I think that the reality is we're not. We're human. We're human just like everybody else. We are human, and we actually kind of love violence. But I think it's in particular getting someone to acknowledge that, oh, actually I like violence. I'm not raising my flag. I'm having a good time. I'm enjoying this. Or maybe I'm waving my flag, I'm still having a great time.
So you could enjoy violence and also being good people on the surface.
I think it's about what I'm interested in is I was very happy, I think for any artist when you're making a piece, at a certain point you start to wonder, is this saying what I want it to say, right? Or is this having the impact that I'm hoping for? We had a rehearsal last week where we invited some B-Floor members to come and watch it. And the thing that made me the happiest was hearing from one of the other members who had never seen the show, that he watched it and he was like, I was shocked by myself. I felt surprised by what I found out about myself while I was watching the show. And I felt like that's it. That's the thing. So it's not that I am not interested in judging the audience members. I am interested in creating opportunities for them to learn something about themselves or discover something in the process of watching the show.